Greetings, maliciouses. Welcome back to Disenthrall. We're going to continue our reading today of the Anarchist Handbook, organized by Michael Malice. We are in the middle of Lysander Spooner, and we're about to begin his book number 7. It's been a while since we've published anything on this channel, about a month or maybe more. I don't know, I haven't looked. A lot of life changes going on this side. A lot of really cool projects in the works that are going to be announced very soon. So that's why there hasn't been much content. I'm actually hiring somebody to sort of be the back-end producer, editor, poster for this channel, for actually all 4 of my channels now, so that I can have time to continue making content and paying somebody to kind of do the back-end work, you know, all the busy work that's required to maintain content output. So maybe for the first time in the history of any of my channels, I'm actually paying someone to help. So I think that is, I feel more justified today than I ever have before in asking you guys, if you enjoy the content that you get on this channel, on the second Disenthrall 2 channel, on Anarchist, on Think Time, on Peaceful Parenting University, any of our channels, if you appreciate the content, it is literally paid for by the supporters, and I would really appreciate it if you could help me continue to be able to pay people so that I can actually continue to make content. Okay, so advertising out of the way, you can support the channel at disenthrall.me/support. Okay, so this will be the first reading of this book that I haven't done as a live stream, so I won't be able to be interactive with you guys today. So sorry for that, but we just need to get it recorded. Otherwise, it will never happen right now. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get into some more Spooner reading. All right, Book 7. It is plain, then, that on general principles of law and reason, such principles as we all act upon in the courts of justice and in common life, the Constitution is no contract, that it binds nobody, and never did bind anybody, and that all those who pretend to act by its authority are really acting without any legitimate authority at all. That on general principles of law and reason they are mere usurpers, and that everybody not only has the right, but is morally bound to treat them as such. If the people of this country wish to maintain such a government as the Constitution describes, there is no reason in the world why they should not sign the instrument itself, and thus make known their wishes in an open, authentic manner, in such manner as the common sense and experience of mankind have shown to be reasonable and necessary in such cases, and in such manner as to make themselves, as they ought to do, individually responsible for the acts of the government. But the people have never been asked to sign it. And the only reason why they have never been asked to sign it has been that it has been known that they never would sign it, that they were neither such fools nor knaves as they must needs have been to be willing to sign it, that, at least as it had been practically interpreted, it is not what any sensible and honest man wants for himself, nor such as he has any right to impose on others. It is, to all moral intents and purposes, as destitute of obligation as the compacts which robbers and thieves and pirates enter into with each other but never sign. If any considerable number of people believe the Constitution to be good, why do they not sign it themselves, and make laws for and administer them upon each other, leaving all other persons who do not interfere with them in peace? Until they have tried the experiment for themselves, how can they have the face to impose the Constitution upon, or even recommend it to others? Plainly, the reason for such absurd and inconsistent conduct is that they want the Constitution not solely for any honest or legitimate use it can be of to themselves or others, but for the dishonest and illegitimate power it gives them over the persons and properties of others. But For this latter reason, all their eulogiums, let's go with that. All their eulogiums on the Constitution, all their exhortations, and all their expenditures of money and blood to sustain it would be wanting. All right, now next book, number 8. Or chapter or part, I don't know what these are. It's number 8, okay? If you want the official reading, I've published the entire audiobook without my dumb commentary. The Constitution itself, then, being of no authority, on what authority does our government practically rest? On what ground can those who pretend to administer it claim the right to seize men's property, to restrain them of their natural liberty of action, industry, and trade, and to kill all who deny their authority, to dispose of men's properties, liberties, and lives at their pleasure or discretion? The most they can say in answer to this question is that some half, 2/3, or 3/4 of the male adults of the country have a tacit understanding that they will maintain a government under the Constitution, that they will select by ballot the persons to administer it, and that those persons who may receive a majority or a plurality of their ballots shall act as their representatives and administer the Constitution in their name and by their authority. But this tacit understanding, admitting it to exist, cannot at all justify the conclusion drawn from it. A tacit understanding between A, B, and C that they will, by ballot, depute D as their agent, to deprive me of my property, liberty, or life, cannot at all authorize D to do so. He is none the less a robber, tyrant, and murderer because he claims to act as their agent than he would be if he avowedly acted on his own responsibility alone. Neither am I bound to recognize him as their agent, nor can he legitimately claim to be their agent when he brings no written authority from them accrediting him as such. I am under no obligation to take his word as to who his principals may be, or whether he has any. Bringing no credentials, I have a right to say he has no such authority, even as he claims to have, and that he is therefore intending to rob, enslave, or murder me on his own account. This tacit understanding, therefore, among the voters of the country amounts to nothing as an authority to their agents. Neither do the ballots by which they select their agents avail any more than does their tacit understanding, for their ballots are given in secret, and therefore in a way to avoid any personal responsibility for the acts of their agents. No body of men can be said to authorize a man to act as their agent, to the injury of a third person, unless they do it in so open and authentic a manner as to make themselves personally responsible for his acts. None of the voters in this country appoint their political agents in any open, authentic manner, or in any manner to make themselves responsible for their acts. Therefore, these pretended agents cannot legitimately claim to be really agents. Somebody must be responsible for the acts of these pretended agents. And if they cannot show any open and authentic credentials from their principles, they cannot, in law or reason, be said to have any principles. The maxim applies here, that what does not appear does not exist. If they can show no principles, they have none. But even these pretended agents do not themselves know who their pretended principles are. These latter act in secret, for acting by secret ballot is acting in secret as much as if they were to meet in secret conclave in the darkness of the night. And they are personally as much unknown to the agents they select as they are to others. No pretended agent, therefore, can ever know by whose ballots he is selected, or consequently who his real principles are. Not knowing who his principles are, he has no right to say that he has any. He can at most say only that he is the agent of a secret band of robbers and murderers, who are bound by that faith which prevails among confederates in crime to stand by him if his acts, done in their name, shall be resisted. Men honestly engaged in attempting to establish justice in the world have no occasion thus to act in secret, or to appoint agents to do acts for which they, the principals, are not willing to be responsible. The secret ballot makes a secret government, and a secret government is a secret band of robbers and murderers. Open despotism is better than this. The single despot stands out in the face of all men and says, "I am the state, my will is law. I am your master. I take the responsibility of my acts. The only arbiter I acknowledge is the sword. If anyone denies my might, my right, let him try conclusions with me." But a secret government is little less than a government of assassins. Under it, a man knows not who his tyrants are until they have struck, and perhaps not even then. He may guess beforehand as to some of his immediate neighbors, but he really knows nothing. The man to whom he would most naturally fly for protection may prove an enemy when the time of trial comes. This is the kind of government we have, and it is the only one we are likely to have until men are ready to say, "We will consent to no constitution except such an one as we are neither ashamed nor afraid to sign, and we will authorize no government to do anything in our name which are not willing to be personally responsible for, which we are not willing to be personally responsible for." Part 9. What is the motive to the secret ballot? This and only this. Like other confederates in crime, those who use it are not friends but enemies, and they are afraid to be known and to have their individual doings known even to each other. They can contrive to bring about a sufficient understanding to enable them to act in concert against other persons, but beyond this they have no confidence and no friendship among themselves. In fact, they are engaged quite as much in schemes for plundering each other as in plundering those who are not of them. And it is perfectly well understood among them that the strongest party among them will, in certain contingencies, murder each other by the hundreds of thousands, as they lately did do, to accomplish their purposes against each other. Hence they dare not be known and have their individual doings known, even to each other. And this is avowedly the only reason for the ballot, for a secret government, a government by secret bands of robbers and murderers. And we are insane enough to call this liberty. To be a member of this secret band of robbers and murderers is esteemed a privilege and an honor. Without this privilege, a man is considered a slave, but with it a free man. With it, he is considered a free man because he has the same power to secretly, by secret ballot, procure the robbery, enslavement, and murder of another man, and that other man has to procure his robbery, enslavement, and murder. And they call this equal rights. If any number of men, many or few, claim the right to govern the people of this country, let them make and sign an open compact with each other to do so. Let them thus make themselves individually known to those whom they propose to govern, and let them thus openly take the legitimate responsibility of their acts. How many of those who now support the Constitution will ever do this? How many will ever dare openly proclaim their right to govern or take the legitimate responsibility of their acts? Not one. Part 10. It is obvious that, on general principles of law and reason, there exists no such thing as a government created by or resting upon any consent, compact, or agreement of, quote, the people of the United States with each other. That the only visible, tangible, responsible government that exists is that of a few individuals only who act in concert and call themselves by the several names of senators, representatives, presidents, judges, marshals, treasurers, collectors, generals, colonels, captains, etc., etc. On general principles of law and reason, it is of no importance whatever that those few individuals profess to be the agents and representatives of, quote, the people of the United States. Since they can show no credentials from the people themselves, they were never appointed as agents or representatives in any open, authentic manner. They do not themselves know and have no means of knowing, and cannot prove who their principals, as they call them, are individually, and consequently cannot in law or reason be said to have any principles at all. It is obvious, too, that if these alleged principals ever did appoint these pretended agents or representatives, they appointed them secretly by secret ballot, and in a way to avoid all personal responsibility for their acts, that, at most, these alleged principals put these pretended agents forward for the most criminal purposes, viz., to plunder the people of their property, and to restrain them of their liberty, and that the only authority that these alleged principals have for so doing is simply a tacit understanding among themselves that they will imprison, shoot, or hang every man who resists the exactions and restraints which their agents or representatives may impose upon them. Thus, it is obvious that the only visible, tangible government we have is made up of these professed agents or representatives of a secret band of robbers and murderers who, to cover up or gloss over their robberies and murders, have taken to themselves the title of the people of the United States, and who, on the pretense of being the people of the United States, assert their right to subject their dominion and to control and dispose of at their pleasure all property and persons found in the United States. Part 11. On general principles of law and reason, the oaths which these pretended agents of the people, quote, on general principles of law and reason, the oaths which these pretended agents of the people take, quote, to support the Constitution, are of no validity or obligation. And why? For this, if for no other reason, viz., that they are given to nobody. There is no privity, as the lawyers say, that is, no mutual recognition, consent, and agreement between those who take these oaths and any other persons. If I go upon Boston Common, and in the presence of 100,000 people, men, women, and children with whom I have no contract on the subject, take an oath that I will enforce upon them the laws of Moses, of Lycurgus, of Solon, of Justinian, or of Alfred, that oath is, on general principles of law and reason, of no obligation. It is of no obligation, not merely because it is intrinsically a criminal one, but also because it is given to nobody, and consequently pledges my faith to nobody. It is merely given to the winds. It would not alter the case at all to say that among these 100,000 persons in whose presence the oath was taken, there were 2, 3, or 5,000 male adults who had secretly, by secret ballot and in a way to avoid making themselves individually known to me or to the remainder of the 100,000, designated me as their agent to rule, control, plunder, and, if need be, murder these 100,000 people. The fact that they had designated me secretly, and in a manner to prevent my knowing them individually, prevents all privity between them and me, and consequently makes it impossible that there can be any contract or pledge of faith on my part towards them. For it is impossible that I can pledge my faith in any legal sense to a man whom I neither know nor have any means of knowing individually. So far as I'm concerned, then, these 2, 3, or 5,000 persons are a secret band of robbers and murderers who have secretly and in a way to save themselves from all responsibility for my acts designated me as their agent, and have through some other agent or pretended agent made their wishes known to me. But being nevertheless individually known to me and having no open authentic contract with me, my oath is, on general principles of law and reason, of no validity as a pledge of faith to them. and being no pledge of faith to them, it is no pledge of faith to anybody. It is mere idle wind. At most, it is only a pledge of faith to an unknown band of robbers and murderers, whose instrument for plundering and murdering other people I thus publicly confess myself to be. And it has no other obligation than a similar oath given to any other unknown body of pirates, robbers, and murderers. For these reasons, the oaths taken by members of Congress to, quote, support the Constitution are, on general principles of law and reason, of no validity. They are not only criminal in themselves and therefore void, but they are also void for the further reason that they are given to nobody. It cannot be said that in any legitimate or legal sense they are given to, quote, the people of the United States, because neither the whole nor any large proportion of the whole people of the United States ever, either openly or secretly, appointed or designated these men as their agents to carry the Constitution into effect. The great body of the people, that is, men, women, and children, were never asked or even permitted to signify in any formal manner, either openly or secretly, their choice or wish on the subject. The most that these members of Congress can say in favor of their appointment is simply this. Each one can say for himself, I have evidence satisfactory to myself that there exists, scattered throughout the country, a band of men having a tacit understanding with each other and calling themselves the people of the United States, whose general purposes are to control and plunder each other, and all other persons in the country, and so far as they can, even in neighboring countries, and to kill every man who shall attempt to defend his person and property against their schemes of plunder and dominion. Who these men are individually, I have no certain means of knowing, for they sign no papers and give no open, authentic evidence of their individual membership. They are not known individually even to each other. They are apparently as much afraid of being individually known to each other as of being known to other persons. Hence, they ordinarily have no mode either of exercising or of making known their individual membership, otherwise than by giving their votes secretly for certain agents to do their will. But although these men are individually unknown both to each other and to other persons, it is generally understood in the country that none but male persons of the age of 21 years and upwards can be members. It is also generally understood that all male persons born in the country, having certain complexions, and in some localities certain amounts of property, and in certain cases are even persons of foreign birth, are permitted to be members. But it appears that usually not more than 1/2, 2/3, or in some cases 3/4 of all who are thus permitted to become members of the band ever exercise or consequently prove their actual membership in the only mode in which they ordinarily can exercise or prove it, viz., by giving their votes secretly for the officers or agents of the band. The number of these secret votes, so far as we have any account of them, varies greatly from year to year, thus tending to prove that the band, instead of being a permanent organization, is a merely pro tempore affair, with those who choose to act with it for the time being. The gross number of these secret votes, or what purports to be their gross number in different localities, is occasionally published. Whether these reports are accurate or not, we have no means of knowing. It is generally supposed that great frauds are often committed in depositing them. They are understood to be received and counted by certain men who are themselves appointed for that purpose by the same secret process by which all other officers and agents of the band are selected. According to the reports of these receivers of votes, for whose accuracy or honesty, however, I cannot vouch, and according to my best knowledge of the whole number of male persons in my district who, it is supposed, were permitted to vote, it would appear that 1/2, 2/3, or 3/4 actually did vote. Who the men were individually who cast these votes, I have no knowledge, for the whole thing was done secretly. But of the secret votes thus given for what they call a, quote, member of Congress, the receivers reported that I had a majority, or at least a larger number than any other person. And it is only by virtue of such a designation that I am now here to act in concert with other persons similarly selected in other parts of the country. It is understood among those who sent me here that all the persons so selected will, on coming together at the city of Washington, take an oath in each other's presence to, quote, support the Constitution of the United States. By this is meant a certain paper that was drawn up 80 years ago. It was never signed by anybody and apparently has no obligation, and never had any obligation as a contract. In fact, few persons ever read it, and doubtless much the largest number of those who voted for me and the others never even saw it, or now pretend to know what it means. Nevertheless, it is often spoken of in the country as, quote, the Constitution of the United States. And for some reason or other, the men who sent me here seem to expect that I and all with whom I act will swear to carry this Constitution into effect. I am therefore ready to take this oath, and to cooperate with all others similarly selected who are ready to take the same oath. This is the most that any member of Congress can say in proof that he has any constituency, that he represents anybody, that his oath to support the Constitution is given to anybody, or pledges his faith to anybody. He has no open, written or other authentic evidence, such as is required in all other cases, that he was ever appointed the agent or representative of anybody. He has no written power of attorney from any single individual. He has no such legal knowledge as is required in all other cases by which he can identify a single one of those who pretend to have appointed him to represent them. Of course, his oath, professedly given to them, quote, to support the Constitution, is on general principles of law and reason an oath given to nobody. It pledges his faith to nobody. If he fails to fulfill his oath, not a single person can come forward and say to him, "You have betrayed me or broken faith with me." No one can come forward and say to him, "I appointed you my attorney to act for me. I required you to swear that, as my attorney, you would support the Constitution. You promised me that you would do so, and now you have forfeited the oath you gave to me." No single individual can say this. No open, avowed, or responsible association or body of men can come forward and say to him, "We appointed you our attorney to act for us. We required you to swear that as our attorney you would support the Constitution. You promised us that you would do so, and now you have forfeited the oath you gave to us." No open, avowed, or responsible association or body of men can say this to him, because there is no such association or body of men in existence. If anyone should assert that there is such an association, let him prove, if he can, who compose it. Let him produce, if he can, any open, written, or other authentic contract signed or agreed to by these men, forming themselves into an association, making themselves known as such to the world, appointing him as their agent, and making themselves individually or as an association responsible for his acts done by their authority. Until all this can be shown, no one can say that in any legitimate sense there is any such association, or that he is their agent, or that he ever gave his oath to them or pledged his faith to them. On general principles of law and reason, it would be a sufficient answer for him to say to all individuals and all pretended associations of individuals who should accuse him of a breach of faith to them, "I never knew you. Where is your evidence that you, either individually or collectively, ever appointed me your attorney? That you ever required me to swear to you that as your attorney I would support the Constitution? Or that I have now broken any faith I ever pledged to you?" You may or you may not be members of that secret band of robbers and murderers who act in secret, appoint their agents by secret ballot, who keep themselves individually unknown even to the agents they thus appoint, and who therefore cannot claim that they have any agents, or that any of their pretended agents ever gave his oath or pledged his faith to them. I repudiate you altogether. My oath was given to others, with whom you have nothing to do. Or it was idle wind given only to the idle winds. Begone. Ah. Part 12. For the same reasons, the oaths of all the other pretended agents of this secret band of robbers and murderers are, on general principles of law and reason, equally destitute of obligation. They are given to nobody, but only to the winds. The oaths of the tax gatherers and treasurers of the band are, on general principles of law and reason, of no validity. If any tax gatherer, for example, should put the money he receives into his own pocket and refuse to part with it, the members of this band could not say to him, "You collected that money as our agent and for our uses, and you swore to pay it over to us, or to those we should appoint to receive it. You have betrayed us and broken faith with us." It would be a sufficient answer for him to say to them, "I never knew you, you never made yourselves individually known to me, and I never gave my oath to you as individuals. You may or you may not be members of that secret band who appoint agents to rob and murder other people, but who are cautious not to make themselves individually known either to such agents or to those whom their agents are commissioned to rob. If you are members of that band, you have given me no proof that you ever commissioned me to rob others for your benefit. I never knew you as individuals, and of course never promised you that I would pay over to you the proceeds of my robberies. I committed my robberies on my own account and for my own profit. And you thought I was fool enough to allow you to keep yourselves concealed and use me as your tool for robbing other persons, or that I would take all the personal risk of the robberies and then pay over the proceeds to you. You were particularly simple. As I took all the risk of my robberies, I proposed to take all the profits. Begone! You are fools as well as villains. If I gave my oath to anybody, I gave it to other persons than you. But I really gave it to nobody. I only gave it to the winds. It answered my purposes at the time. It enabled me to get the money I was after, and now I propose to keep it. If you expected me to pay it over to you, you relied only upon that honor that is said to prevail among thieves. You now understand that that is a very poor reliance. I trust you may become wise enough to never rely upon it again. If I have any duty in the matter, it is to give back the money to those whom I took it, not to pay it over to such villains as you. Part 13. On general principles of law and reason, the oaths which foreigners take on coming here and being, quote, naturalized, as it is called, are of no validity. They are necessarily given to nobody because there is no open authentic association to which they can join themselves or to whom as individuals they can pledge their faith. No such association or organization as, quote, the people of the United States having ever been formed by any open written authentic or voluntary contract, there is on general principles of law and reason no such association or organization in existence. And all oaths that purport to be given to such an association are necessarily given only to the winds. They cannot be said to be given to any man or body of men as individuals, because no man or body of men can come forward with any proof that the oaths were given to them as individuals or to any association of which they are members. To say that there is a tacit understanding among a portion of the male adults of the country that they will call themselves the people of the United States, and that they will act in concert in subjecting the remainder of the people of the United States to their dominion, but that they will keep themselves personally concealed by doing all their acts secretly, is wholly insufficient on general principles of law and reason to prove the existence of any such association or organization as, quote, the people of the United States, or consequently to prove that the oaths of foreigners were given to any such association. Part 14. On general principles of law and reason, all the oaths which, since the war, have been given by Southern men that they will obey the laws of Congress, support the Union, and the like, are of no validity. Such oaths are invalid not only because they were extorted by military power, not only because they were extorted by military power and threats of confiscation, and because they are in contravention of men's natural right to do as they please about supporting the government, but also because they were given to nobody. They were nominally given to, quote, the United States, but being nominally given to the United States, they were necessarily given to nobody, because on general principles of law and reason, there were no United States to whom the oaths could be given. That is to say, there was no open, authentic, avowed, legitimate association, corporation, or body of men known as the United States, or as, quote, the people of the United States, to whom the oaths could have been given. Are you detecting a pattern here? If anybody says there was such a corporation, let him state who were the individuals that composed it, and how and when they became a corporation. Were Mr. A, Mr. B, and Mr. C members of it? If so, where are their signatures? Where the evidence of their membership? Where the record? Where the open, authentic proof? There is none, therefore. In law and reason, there was no such corporation. On general principles of law and reason, every corporation, association, or organized body of men having a legitimate corporate existence and legitimate corporate rights must consist of certain known individuals who can prove by legitimate and reasonable evidence their membership. But nothing of this kind can be proved in regard to the corporation or body of men who call themselves the United States. Not a man of them in all the northern states can prove by any legitimate evidence, such as is required to prove membership in other legal corporations, that he himself or any other man whom he can name is a member of any corporation or association called the United States or the people of the United States, or, consequently, that there is any such corporation. And since no such corporation can be proved to exist, it cannot, of course, be proved that the oaths of Southern men were given to any such corporation. The most that can be claimed is that the oaths were given to a secret band of robbers and murderers who called themselves the United States and extorted those oaths. But that certainly is not enough to prove that the oaths are of any obligation. Oh, man. This guy is detail-oriented. Let's see, who's next? Oh, the oaths of soldiers. Okay. What do you think? Is it going to be because the oaths were given to the wind? Let's find out. On general principles of law and reason, the oaths of soldiers that they will serve a given number of years, that they will obey the orders of their superior officers, that they will bear true allegiance to the government, and so forth, are of no obligation. Independently of the criminality of an oath that for a given number of years he will kill all whom he may be commanded to kill without exercising his own judgment or conscience as to the justice or necessity of such killing, there is this further reason why a soldier's oath is of no obligation, viz., that, like all the other oaths that have now been mentioned, it is given to nobody. Called it! There being, in no legitimate sense, any such corporation or nation as the United States, nor consequently in any legitimate sense any such government as the government of the United States, a soldier's oath given to or contract made with such nation or government is necessarily an oath given to or a contract made with nobody. Consequently, such oath or contract can be of no obligation. Wow, I wish they were all that short. Feel like we're just saying the same thing for different things. On, let's see, 16. On general principles of law and reason, the treaties, so-called, which purport to be entered into with other nations by persons calling themselves ambassadors, secretaries, presidents, and senators of the United States in the name of and in behalf of, quote, the people of the United States, are of no validity. These so-called ambassadors, secretaries, presidents, and senators who claim to be the agents of the people of the United States for making these treaties can show no open, written, or other authentic evidence that either the whole people of the United States or any other open, avowed, responsible body of men calling themselves by that name ever authorized these pretended ambassadors and others to make treaties in the name of, or binding upon, any one of the people of the United States, or any other open, avowed, responsible body of men calling themselves by that name, ever authorized these pretended ambassadors, secretaries, and others in their name and behalf to recognize certain other persons calling themselves, oh my goodness, to recognize certain other persons calling themselves emperors, kings, queens, and the like as the rightful rulers, sovereigns, masters, or representatives of the different peoples whom they assume to govern and to represent and to bind. The nations, as they are called, with whom our pretended ambassadors, secretaries, presidents, and senators profess to make treaties are as much myths as our own. On general principles of law and reason, there are no such nations. That is to say, neither the whole people of England, for example, nor any open, avowed, responsible body of men calling themselves by that name ever, by any open, written, or other authentic contract with each other, formed themselves into any bona fide, legitimate association or organization, or authorized any king, queen, or other representative to make treaties in their name, or to bind them either individually or as an association by such treaties. Our pretended treaties, then, being made with no legitimate or bona fide nations or representatives of nations, and being made on our part by persons who have no legitimate authority to act for us, have intrinsically no more validity than a pretended treaty made by the man in the moon with the king of Pleiades. Number 17. On general principles of law and reason, debts contracted in the name of the United States or of the people of the United States are of perfect validity. Wait. Just was checking to see if you were paying attention. Oh. Are of no validity. It is utterly absurd to pretend that debts to the amount of 25 what is the debt clock? 25 trillion or something nuts right now? Let's keep that in mind when we read this. It is utterly absurd to pretend that debts to the amount of 2,500 millions of dollars are binding upon 35 or 40 millions of people, when there is not a particle of legitimate evidence such as would be required to prove a private debt that can be produced against any one of them, that either he or his properly authorized attorney ever contracted to pay 1 cent. Certainly, neither the whole people of the United States nor any number of them ever separately or individually contracted to pay a cent of these debts. Certainly also, neither the whole people of the United States nor any number of them ever, by any open, written, or other authentic and voluntary contract, united themselves as a firm, corporation, or association by the name of the United States or the people of the United States, and authorized their agents to contract debts in their name. If it seems like we're reading like something a lawyer would file in a court, it's because he was a lawyer. That's why. Very thorough. Certainly, too, there is in existence no such firm, corporation, or association as the United States, formed by any open, written, or other authentic and voluntary contract, and having no corporate property with which to pay these debts. How then is it possible on any general principle of law or reason that debts that are binding upon nobody individually can be binding upon 40 million people collectively? When, on general and legitimate principles of law and reason, these 40 million people neither have nor ever had any corporate property, never made any corporate or individual contract, and neither have nor ever had any corporate existence. Who then created these debts in the name of the United States? Why, at most, only a few persons calling themselves members of Congress, etc., who pretended to represent the people of the United States, but who really represented only a secret band of robbers and murderers who wanted money to carry on the robberies and murders in which they were engaged, and who intended to extort from the future people of the United States, by robbery and threats of murder and real murder if it should prove necessary, the means to pay these debts. This band of robbers and murderers, who were the real principals in contracting these debts, is a secret one, because its members have never entered into any open, written, avowed, or authentic contract, by which they may be individually known to the world, or even to each other. Their real or pretended representatives who contracted these debts in their name were selected, if selected at all, for that purpose secretly, by secret ballot, and in a way to furnish evidence against none of the principals individually, and these principals were really known individually neither to their pretended representatives who contracted these debts in their behalf, nor to those who lent the money. The money, therefore, was all borrowed and lent in the dark, that is, by men who did not see each other's faces or know each other's names, who could not then and cannot now identify each other as principals in the transactions, and who consequently can prove no contract with each other. Furthermore, the money was all lent and borrowed for criminal purposes, that is, for purposes of robbery and murder, and for this reason the contracts were all intrinsically void, and would have been so even though the real parties, borrowers and lenders, had come face to face and made their contracts openly in their own proper names. Furthermore, this secret band of robbers and murderers, who were the real borrowers of this money, having no legitimate corporate existence, have no corporate property with which to pay these debts. They do indeed pretend to own large tracts of wild lands laying between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, and between the Gulf of Mexico and the North Pole, but on general principles of law and reason, they might as well pretend to own the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans themselves, or the atmosphere and the sunlight, and to hold them and dispose of them for the payments of these debts. Having no corporate property with which to pay what purports to be their corporate debts, this secret band of robbers and murderers are really bankrupt. They have nothing to pay with. In fact, they do not propose to pay their debts otherwise than from the proceeds of their future robberies and murders. These are confessedly their sole reliance, and were known to be such by the lenders of the money at the time the money was lent. And it was therefore virtually a part of the contract that the money should be repaid only from the proceeds of these future robberies and murders. For this reason, if for no other, the contracts were void from the beginning. In fact, these apparently two classes, borrowers and lenders, were really one and the same class. They borrowed and lent money from and to themselves. They themselves were not only part and parcel, but the very life and soul of this secret band of robbers and murderers who borrowed and spent the money. Individually, they furnished money for a common enterprise, taking in return what purported to be corporate promises for individual loans. The only excuse they had for taking these so-called corporate promises for individual loans by the same parties was that they might have some apparent excuse for the future robberies of the band, that is, to pay the debts of the corporation, and that they might also know what shares they were to be respectively entitled to out of the proceeds of their future robberies. Finally, if these debts had been created for the most innocent and honest purposes, and in the most open and honest manner by the real parties to the contracts, these parties could thereby have bound nobody but themselves, and no property but their own. They could have bound nobody that should have come after them, and no property subsequently created by or belonging to other persons. Oh, we're about to get into the world banking scam. It's going to be good. All right. You know what? Let's save this for the next recording. We'll finish out Spooner in the next one. This will be good. Good place to stop. All right, guys. I hope you're enjoying this reading. Let me know in the comments if you are. Remember that there is a full, professionally produced audiobook without my commentary available on Disenthrall. You can find all of our audiobooks, I think, at disenthrall.me/audiobooks. I published the Lysander Spooner, the full book, as a professional audiobook on, I was going to do an Audible, but there's some copyright nonsense preventing that from being possible. So it's available on all of our platforms for free. If you enjoy what we're doing and you want to donate to help cover our costs and keep us able to produce content, please consider supporting the show at disenthrall.me/support. Thanks, everybody.